Well, welcome everyone to our informational meeting, and this is an opportunity to hear more about our midsummer retreat in Sweden. Something very, very exciting for us to lead. It's a real blessing and a privilege to go to Gotland and be on an enchanted island. You know, there is something about islands that really just create a container. In some ways, you know, if you think about the journey and the labyrinth, the whole island of Gotland is basically the center of the labyrinth because there's so many labyrinths. So um, it's also home to classical labyrinths, which many people haven't experienced as deeply as, you know, the Chartres medieval labyrinth, which not only in Chartres, if you've had the opportunity to go there, but at Grace Cathedral or the National Cathedral here in Washington, D.C. But, you know, if you really want to immerse yourself in the classical labyrinth, I can't think of a better place to go and see them in 7, 11, 15 circuit examples of the design. So really neat. So my first trip to Gotland was actually in 2011, and I was tracing my ancestral roots. So I'm half Scottish and half Swedish, and I went to Iona to kind of connect to the labyrinth in Scotland, and then I went to Gotland to connect to the labyrinths there. But what was surprising was when I arrived on Gotland and went to the tourist office, I said, you know, where are the labyrinths on the island? I heard there's like 40 or 50. And they said, there's one north of town, you know, just north of town, there's the Borg. And I said, oh yeah, but what about the others? I saw that one on the map. Like I know where that is, but I said, I don't know. Is there any other one on the island? And they're like calling in the back office, like, you know, any labyrinths? No, no. Oh, there's one at the school. There's one at the school, also an hour north of town. And he said, but what about there's all the other historical labyrinths? And they're like, I'm sorry, we don't know. So then I went to the library and I said, do you have any books about the labyrinths of Gotland? And they searched the database. They didn't have any books about labyrinths, not about any labyrinth of anywhere, of history, of chart, of Sweden, of nothing. And then they said, oh, we do have one magazine article from 1983. So let's go look. So we went way up, way back. We got like this archive of like 12 issues of a magazine, this old book. We pull it out. And in the magazine is an article that's like the treasure map of labyrinths in Gotland. It's this journalist who had gone through all the archaeological surveys, and anytime a labyrinth was written in a survey, he compiled all that information into one article and had maps drawn with the labyrinths that he had gone back to confirm that they were there. And the whole article was in Swedish, but they made me a photocopy. And with that article and the little maps and asking people what this meant or that meant, I went around the island and I rented a car for 5 days and I walked 18 labyrinths
Wow.
and found maybe four others that were in disarray, that were unwalkable, and two of them that were buried. So, like, I was walking on the ground and I could feel something in the grass. And then I went to the center of this clearing and there was like one stone like rising above the grass. And then I thought, wait a second. I started stepping on concentric rings and I counted and there were 15 rings or 16 of a 15 circuit labyrinth completely buried under the grass, which was really incredible. So the next year I went back with my fiance because I really wanted to show her the island. And we went back together in 2012. And then I decided to bring people there. So I collaborated with Kimberly and Jeff Sayward and did two tours of Gotland with them in 2015 and 2016. And then my daughter was born, so I didn't want to leave the family. And so she was just about getting into preschool when the pandemic hit. So then we waited another couple years. But in 2016 also, I had come back to teach Labyrinth Summer School. And I was in Labyrinth Summer School singing the praises of Gotland, and I said, "Oh my God, there's these labyrinths, and it's this island, and incredible." And at lunch, one of the participants in the workshop came up to me, and she said, "Lars, my family is from Gotland. I I have, been there every summer. I know the island so much. I can't believe, that you are connecting to this." And that was Valarie. And I thought, "Oh my God, if I ever go back to Gotland, I would love to go with you and, get to connect with the culture and the local stories and local songs." And so then when the pandemic subsided, Valarie and I last year led a group to Gotland. So it was really great collaboration. So welcome, Valarie.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I always joke that Lars has such a great connection with everybody, and it's around the labyrinth, around the whole breadth of labyrinths and what we do in labyrinths. But for him and I, it's always Gotland. It's our special connection and our special place. And is what led me to Labyrinth Summer School was really I had walked the Troyabor so many years and really wanted to put one in my front yard, but I didn't know how to build one. And I knew the seed pattern and this and that, but other than the folk stories around the Troyabor Labyrinth in Visby, I really didn't know much more about labyrinths. So I went to Labyrinth Summer School, learned how to build labyrinths, ended up building a big one in my front yard. It's at least 40 feet, 17 pallets of stones. Um,
Oh,
and so then after the pandemic ended and Lars reached out to me, we formed our pilgrimage last year, which was just such a great joy to go around to the walkable labyrinths and really share their stories and their songs and their traditions. And I think we walked 11 labyrinths and did ceremony in 9 of them. So really bringing back those traditions. And the article in the Archive magazine that Lars discovered, he shared with me. And so I've spent many summers also labyrinth hunting. It's like a real archaeological adventure. And many of them we can't walk anymore. We've planted seeds like maybe we need to go back and repair a few. This year's retreat is completely different than anything we did last year. The nice thing about having 50 or so labyrinths on an island is that you don't have to visit the same ones over and over again. So this year, we really planned a theme around the matriarchy on the island and the various stages of being female and womanhood and our songs and our dances and what's important to us from our mythology. And so we've just created an entirely different experience this year. And I can speak for both Lars and I. Gotland, we love to share Gotland with people and to create really immersive experiences that stay with you, that really stay with you. Yeah.
yeah. I think it was pretty much packing my bag at the end of that week last year. We were already like, we coming back? Should we book the hotel? Is this gonna, we got to do this again? Because it just exceeded our own expectations and we'd already been there. I don't know. You've been there many, many times and I've been there, I guess, 6. So yeah, we were excited to go back and keep exploring and learning new things because we learn on journey together. So um, that's the real blessing is to be in community, walking these labyrinths and sharing in these rituals and experiences. So the dates for our retreat are the same that we did last year. It's the week leading up to midsummer, so it's the 15th through the 22nd, and it's all centered on the island of Gotland. Um, Many people may be surprised to learn that Sweden has the most ancient and historic labyrinths in the world, at least that have survived. So there's over 400 walkable labyrinths. And if you count the ones etched or painted in churches and other examples, there's maybe over 500. So Sweden has been through 5 periods of creation and use of labyrinths at least. So, like in the United States or Australia, we've basically had one labyrinth revival, but Sweden has had, maybe four revivals and one initial, birthing of labyrinths. So um, some of the cycles have been, originally for midsummer rituals and celebrating the cycles of life. And then there was a period where fishermen would use them before going out to sea. And then there was a period where they were either drawn or painted in the backs of medieval churches. And then there was a period where museums and teachers were creating labyrinths as kind of a historic exercise. But that was in the 1900s. So, in like 1906, they were actually recreating labyrinths as like, this is the history of our country. And then nowadays, a lot of the labyrinths are created out of youth or play. Either children are the ones who build labyrinths, like the two lighthouse labyrinths were built by children ages like 11 and 14. And then other labyrinths are used in playgrounds and things like that. So here's a map of Scandinavia and Western Europe, and you can see that Gotland is the island here in the Baltic Sea. So um, Valarie, do you want to share about, the identity of Gotland a little bit here?
Yeah, so the island has been inhabited for almost 10,000 years. For many years, we were owned by Denmark, and then in the 1700s, we became Swedish. But we're really known for being fishing, merchant, self-governing island before Denmark took us over. And then we're also a bridge to Eastern Europe. So if you look at Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then Belarus and Poland, that's all of Eastern Europe. And then to the north, we have Finland. And then we can still even get to Russia. So we have a lot of those cultures within our island as well. We have our own language, Gotlandsk or Gutnish. And then we speak Swedish in our own special way.
Mhm.
Uh, our foods are very different than Swedish foods, and every now and then during holidays we'll eat Swedish foods, but Gotland food is a bit different. Our industries are limestone and wool. Oh, and we used to like to fish, but the Baltic has gotten a little polluted for that now. So we're not as much fishing people as we used to be. So that's Gotland in a nutshell. We have a very rich Viking history. We have a very rich medieval history. Visby itself is probably one of the more intact medieval cities in Europe. Its wall is pretty complete. There's a couple breaks, but it's still contiguous and goes around the whole city. And there's 3,000 people that live within the city walls. And then there's 60,000 inhabitants on the whole island. And I live up in the north, but my parents are from the midsection and the south.
Great. Yeah. And here's the map that I was mentioning, one of the pages from the article. You can see these dots represent different labyrinths around the island, and these are the historic ones. So labyrinths that are 100 years old or more. So, and this is the map that was drawn in kind of 1983 by John Kraft for the article. So there's been at least, 10 or 20 labyrinths built since this time. So you can see from the bottom tip to the northern tip, there are dots all the way and on every coast and in the center as well. So the labyrinth north of town is probably the most well-known and most used today in modern times, and it also has the most stories surrounding it. So this is maybe like a 10-minute walk from the town center, and it's an 11 circuit classical labyrinth, that's right-handed. So you walk in to the right, and you can see the well-worn path, almost creating these grooves into the earth, which is just incredible to experience. And some of the earliest stories about labyrinths are related to the folklore and the midsummer. So last year, for the first time, we were there, or I was, for the midsummer celebration in Visby. So again, this year on our tour, we will be participating in the local celebration of midsummer with the circle dances around the maypole and the creating of the flower crowns and just enjoying the traditions.
So last year in the morning, we gathered wildflowers. The whole island is just filled with wildflowers, and we made our flower crowns. And then I taught the songs and dances. And it was so fun because everybody knew I would call out the song. They would call out the song, and I would tell everybody what song we were going to do. And they knew all the motions and whether they knew the words or not. It was so exciting for them, everybody, to participate together. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, and there was a procession through town with a horse-drawn carriage with a fiddle band on the back, and you could process alongside the fiddlers, coming through town all the way down to the maypole, which was really cool. So, and this is the other oldest labyrinth on the island, as Valarie was saying, and it's in this town of Fruel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Fruel, yes. So, and there's a lot of stories around this labyrinth, and also there's a water pump here, so you can actually draw water from
Oh,
the labyrinth, and
wow.
really incredible. And a lot of people, are used to seeing labyrinths in churchyards, but you would think that the church is the one that built the labyrinth. But this town, Freuel, is related to Freya, and so it's an old sacred site that predates the Christianity and the building of the churches. And there's no other churches in Sweden that really have labyrinths in their churchyard, especially historically. So, the fact that this labyrinth is in the churchyard, it's often thought that this labyrinth predates the church, and there may have been a second labyrinth too, also on the location here too. So this is an ancient sacred site, and this labyrinth is connected to that old energy. So here you can see some of the things that you may experience around the island as we drive, because we will spend 3 days in the center of Visby, but we'll also spend 3 days on a bus visiting the labyrinths and other sites, such as, this Viking grave. It's a giant stone ship, which is incredible, created in the field. And this is the medieval wall that Valarie was mentioning that surrounds the capital. And then there are picture stones or rune stones around the island as well. Some of them in their original locations and some of them that have been restored. And then also an incredible museum in Visby that we can experience as part of the tour to see the rune stones.
Oh,
This is a very wild labyrinth that was created in the 1970s, so it's one of the more modern ones. But people would use labyrinths before going out to sea. So a lot of the labyrinths are actually by the water, and the fishermen believed that they would, walk very slowly into the labyrinth, and the trolls might follow them into the center and then run out of the center as quickly as possible, and the trolls would get trapped in the labyrinth and unable to follow them onto their boat or cause trouble. And also because the entrance of the labyrinth faced the ocean, perhaps the malevolent winds or would get sucked into the labyrinth and allow for safe passage of the fishing boats. So this one was not used for the fishermen. This one was built by vacationers in the 1970s, but it's just a fun coastal labyrinth that. And then in the churches, there's these incredible 94 Gothic and Romanesque medieval churches on the island, and most of them are still in use. In fact, like one minister will have three churches and rotate between the three, but they've been very well preserved and have actually become their own UNESCO heritage site. So the churches themselves are quite a wonder. And in three of the churches, there are labyrinths. One that has a painted labyrinth, and two that have labyrinths that are etched into the bell towers. So it's really fun to go see these inside and experience the churches.
Stephen.
And here is the examples of some of the etchings on the back walls that we'll visit in one of the churches. You can see an 11 circuit classical labyrinth, but also a smaller 5 circuit labyrinth, and then a boat with kind of concentric circles here nearby. And then this is the seed of life, which is another sacred geometry pattern that's drawn into the walls. So we're going to be not only exploring labyrinths on the tour, but we'll also be looking at other symbols that are, arise on the island and used in different ways. So we're expanding kind of from the labyrinth to include other sacred symbols this year. This is a labyrinth across the street from an outdoor history museum. So they have a collection of antique houses and homes and windmills and things. And then they have a labyrinth that they built as a kind of also a historic experience. But this one also was built more than like 120 years ago. And it's a really nice labyrinth to walk with these very large stones. And so here you can see on one of my trips, there's Jill Jeffrian actually standing in the center of the seed pattern, and another that might be Carmel Stabley also went on one of our trips and touching the center stone of the labyrinth. So it's great to see the lichen just growing, that's what's so neat is to see these stones that have been there and the lichen growing on top of them, and the footprints, following in the footprints of the past. And finally, here is the kind of current. You see these labyrinths that were built in the last 20, 30 years. One in a playground, and so you can play in the labyrinth here next to this Viking boat and this little pig. And then over here is a labyrinth at a farm that the farmer, she said that her children actually used to run and play in the labyrinth in Visby, and would one of them was a unicyclist, and he would actually unicycle the classical labyrinth as training. And eventually he did join the circus. So he often played in the labyrinth. But when she began this farm, because her family had enjoyed the labyrinth north of town so much, she built this labyrinth to connect the energy and spirit of her farm to the past of the island. And they had actually found an ancient cooking site on her farm that showed that people had been cooking and feeding and farming there since the Bronze Age. So she really feels like the labyrinth is a great way to connect, to the history of the island, and to really kind of bridge the energy of the space. And here's the cathedral. So if you've been to Chartres, the Chartres Cathedral, Our Lady of Chartres. And this is also a cathedral dedicated to Mary that was actually consecrated almost exactly the same time as Chartres. I mean, I think it's within 20 years. Like Chartres, it evolved over time, but it's incredible to experience another 800-year-old cathedral in the center of town. And it's actually only 2 blocks away from our hotel. And if you look down here in the very front of the cathedral, outside is a labyrinth that was built just in the 1980s, I think. And it's a square kind of medieval labyrinth. So one of the few labyrinths that's not classical on the island, but they have this paver labyrinth right there in front of the cathedral. So even the current, um, you can see the labyrinth continues to be connected to the culture and history of Gotland.
And a lot of people, even Gotlanders, don't know that that's a labyrinth. They just think it's paving stones. So oftentimes when I walk that labyrinth and I come to the center, I will have gathered a little group around me on the park benches, and I get applause. It becomes performing art.
You're like, there's a
Nobody
labyrinth.
knew it was a labyrinth.
Yeah, and something I learned on the last tour that I'd never known before is that this center white stone is actually a stone from Jerusalem in the center of the labyrinth, which is pretty neat. So you always learn something on a journey. All right. So would you like to share a little bit about our itinerary, Valarie?
Yes. So, as Lars said, this year's theme is sights and symbols, and all these sights and symbols relate back to the labyrinths and or the history of the labyrinth. So, on our first day, we're going to arrive and check in. Our classroom for the week is a 12th century Gothic cathedral ruin, which shares a wall with the hotel, and it's a magnificent place to meet every day for the week. So, our first day, we're going to gather there. And then we will walk everybody to the Troyabor so that you know where it is from the hotel and how to get there so you can access it whenever you want to. Day 2, here is our classroom. We had so much fun there. So the first day that we meet for classes is day 2. We are going to be talking about thread and fiber and clues and why that's important to labyrinths and how we weave ourselves into text, whether that's the written word or whether that's textile, and really talking about the web of life from thread and how that relates to the labyrinth. Then on day 2, we'll also have a walking tour of Visby. In the evening, we'll have an evening circle where we will have some SoulCollage. Day 3, we are further afield. We are going to the northern part of the island. We are going to a sacred site called Åkergården. It's also a place known as Sankta Olaf's home, which is the first church. Saint Olaf hit the island, and the first church originated there. The whole area is sacred to the development and soulfulness and psychology of the Northern Gotlanders. And then we'll go to Bunga, which is where that outdoor museum is. And there are lots of signs and symbols there. And actually, is how the seed pattern came from the way graves were arranged. That's the work of John Craft. We'll look into that and how ruins are used both on Gotland stones and for protection outside of buildings. The runic alphabet, the Elder Futhark, is still used and known on the island. We will also be exploring during our time together the alphabet that came before the Elder Futhark. There's about 17 rune alphabets on the planet. But there was a time when the women were responsible for everybody's spirituality and farming and life. And we can see all across Europe, Central Europe as well, going to Northern and Southern Europe, there are 32 symbols that you can find everywhere in Europe that were used for a period of about 10,000 years. So we're going to be exploring those and how they're used up until modern times. Then day 4, we are going to Fruel. We will be doing a ceremony at Fruel to end our day there. We are going to be talking about the ancient port. At one time, Fruel was the big port. So though we're an island, we don't live in a vacuum. We have always been a place of international trade. People would stop there to repair their boats, their sails, trade goods, take goods. So hopefully getting to see the old port. But in that old port has been found from the Ukraine something called resurrection eggs. We're going to be exploring the ancient myth of how the world was created by a woman from an egg and how eggs were put into graves so that when people got to the other side, they would be able to create their new life from an egg. So it's a full circle moment. We'll be talking about elderhood and the importance of being of service and in service to our myths and songs and stories and our places of importance. Day 5. This is an exciting day. I get excited when I think of day 5. We will be on Eastern Gotland. We will be starting at the church called Lua, which has labyrinths written on the walls, has the seed of life, but then it has runic inscriptions through the whole building. So again, bringing together these elements. But then after lunch, we'll be heading to a labyrinth called beckon. And we will be exploring the importance of the cranes and what that means for Gotlanders. And we will be recreating a crane dance inside the labyrinth. And that hasn't been done in a really long time. So I'm really excited to be together in community and doing that together. Then day 6 must be midsummer. It is midsummer, and I explained a little bit about that earlier, but we will open with our morning meditation and song like we do every day. We'll go to the wild fields and collect flowers. We'll make flower wreaths and laugh a lot. And then we'll head down at 1 o'clock to the botanical garden, which is just right behind the hotel. And we will participate with all of Visby in our midsummer celebration. In our evenings, I haven't talked a lot about that, but there's at least 3 evenings where we'll be doing SoulCollage. We'll be meeting every day for an evening circle with a different focus. Our 7th day, we'll be back at the Troyebor. We'll also be visiting the museum, which you'll have access to the whole time you're there, but that's where we go kind of as a group. And then we will be finishing out our time together with a sacred ceremony at the Troyebor that brings our circle to a close. And then on Sunday morning, we all depart in peace before 11 a.m. and that ends our retreat at that time. Day 7, also, I'll be instructing a little bit about the ruins. We'll be making a set of ruins. I'll be giving you all a little booklet about what they mean. And I'll also include in that little booklet the 32 symbols that were used for thousands of years. So that kind of wraps up our week.
Wow. Yeah. So exciting. And the good thing is the days are long. So, the sun is rising at like 3:30 in the morning and setting at 11 p.m. So we have all the time in the world.
Yeah. And
Even
this
my
year,
daughter stayed up till midnight on
I remember
summer
that.
Eve.
I
She
remember that.
it
Yeah.
was like New Year's for her. She's like, "What? Can we stay up till midnight?" They're like, "Oh,
Yeah, it's so cute.
yeah."
But this year also we've really added in some big spaciousness. So there's one morning where you get to sleep in, and then we get on the bus at around noon. There's other times where we've given you an evening off or an afternoon off, really for you to embrace the idea of getting lost. Gotland really seeds dreams and really inspires people. The light is beautiful, the city is beautiful. So really wanting you to retreat and find those moments of inspiration and reflection for yourself.